What are your worst nightmare neighbor conflict stories? This is more of a funny story than a neighbor from hell, but in our apartment, we kept hearing massive bass, think like a rhythm game, starting at like 6 p.m. to sometimes going till 11 p.m. And it sounded like it was localized right above our bedroom. Finally, one night I go up and bang on the door, but they don't answer. About an hour later, I hear moving around in the apartment above me, so I walk out, hoping to catch them either on the stairs or so I can knock on the door again. I go out, and he's walking down the stairs. When he sees me, he asks if I can turn down the bass so he can sleep. It was like the Spider-Man meme where they are pointing at each other. I told him I thought it was him this entire time. So after we realized it was neither of us, we walked together and found the noise coming from a building 2 buildings down, and it turned out the dude had a drum set in his closet and was rocking out every night. Since we talked to him, we can hear it, but he always stops around 8 p.m. now. So it could have been way worse if the guy was a dick. That's like weirdly wholesome. Yeah, it was really funny. When we were talking to him, I told him he had great tempo, and he cracked up. There was an old guy behind named Lowy. He was a cranky old fart and had fights with every neighbor. His house's lot was the last on the street, and the crossroad where I lived had 4 lots back to his side. So he had 6 lots adjacent to him, and he fought with them all. When I first moved there I tried to get along. I had been warned. I planted a garden and he oversprayed weed killer over a lot of my plants, including several nice watermelon plants. He'd yell at me. He'd yell at my dog. My wife said he was saying obscene stuff to her. One day he called me a fat hillbilly without a pot to piss in. I called him a stupid old Goomba. He was Italian, and he acted like I really hurt his feelings. This went on for years, and he was keeping neighbors agitated as well. Here's the good part. One day I was at a flea market type thing and I saw him in his little accessibility cart. I tried to stay away. Suddenly from behind me, I heard him say, "Hey, aren't you the guy that lives behind me?" I said yeah, and he popped out hand to shake and said how ya doing, and we talked. He was friendly. He told me his wife had a stroke recently and invited me over. I wondering what was going on. That summer he saw me and came out to talk, and we chatted. I mentioned I played guitar and he jumped and said go get it and I'll bring the wife to the kitchen and you can play for her. I was stunned. I was shy about playing, but I brought it over and they thought it was wonderful. One day he apologized for being cranky before. I apologized back. Lowy and I were friends the next few years. He'd tell me stories of when he was a kid in the 1920s. Just became a good guy. None of neighbors forgave him, but I did. I assumed his doctor gave him Prozac or something. Anyway, he died on September 10th, 2001, the day before the infamy. He was a diabetic and took nitroglycerine for his heart. Neighbors said he committed suicide, but I knew another guy that couldn't get his nitro on time and died. I think he had a medical emergency and could not make the call. About a year before he died, he asked me that if something happened to him to check the door on his lawn shed and make sure it was locked. I checked it. It was locked. Dude, what did he have in the shed that he wanted so badly to be locked up? Just a lawn tractor and lawn stuff. In that neighborhood, if you left anything unlocked, stuff went missing. He was just worried about his tractor. Just saying. You ended that story like it was a giant cliffhanger. It was his old 1980s Playboys. I've posted this before. A little backstory for context later. I live in a very spacious country subdivision. We are about 25 years younger than the average owners. Everyone has at least an acre. My husband and I personally built a large shed next to a detached bed garage. It took us about 3 weekends to do it. We also mow our lawn once a week. Our yard isn't meticulous but hardly neglected. We got a letter in the mail one day. It was typed on a typewriter and came from the Uppersmith neighbor group. Name changed. The letter read, "When you first moved in, I wasn't sure if you had the class, finances or breeding to be in our illustrious neighborhood. I see that you finally built a place to hide all the junk you insist on keeping in your yard. Now if only you could do something about that hayfield you call a yard." The junk they were upset about was building materials for the shed that were delivered, used and cleaning up in 3 weeks. I was so mad and revenge was first on my mind for weeks. I couldn't figure out how to handle it to my satisfaction. I figured it out right before the 4th of July. I got 2 old toilets and put one on either side of my driveway by the street. I planted red, white and blue flowers in the bowl and stuck in a couple of small American flags for flair. Then made a large sign that read, "Thank you Upper Smith neighbor group for your letter suggesting I take more pride in my yard." I kept them for a whole year, switching out the bold decorations for every holiday with the wackiest decorations I could find. Good. Let the hate flow through you. At the time, we were living in a new construction neighborhood, one of the nicest in town. Our next door neighbor was an older lady who lived alone and generally kept to herself. I was very surprised when she knocked on our front door one day and asked if I would walk outside with her. She led me to her backyard and across to the property line for the next house. A family with 2 young kids had moved in there a few months prior. I knew they had kids because the 2 were always outside, even though it was winter. My neighbor lady asked me if I smelled anything. I did but couldn't identify it. "They're cooking meth in that house," she said. "I wanted you to verify the smell so I know I'm not imagining it." She had owned rental houses and had encountered the smell from when tenants ruined one by making meth there. "I'm worried about those kids. You go on home now. I'm going inside to call the police." Cops arrived soon after. The parents were arrested immediately. The dad screamed many swear words towards the older lady's house as 2 officers forced him across the yard and into one of their cars. The mom just kept screaming "my babies" as she was taken to a different police car. I couldn't see the kids, but I could hear them screaming and crying. DCS came and took the kids away. They were the first to live in that new house. It had to be completely gutted and redone inside because of the chemicals. That process took nearly a year. Neighbor lady surely heard everything that man yelled, and she probably risked retaliation if he got out on bail. He didn't. But she absolutely saved those 2 kids. I worked on a house in my town that had been completely ruined by meth and hoarding. I kinda became the go-to guy for how to get chemical stains, smells, etc. out because I grew up in a meth house. We ended up having to gut it down to the studs, inside and out, even on the roof. The only things we kept were the wiring, the studs and rafters, and the foundation. Our neighbor kept complaining that the plants by the shared fence in our garden were dragging it down and ruining the plants climbing on her side. You only had to glance at the fence to see that it was massively weighed down on her side. It was sort of a wire fence, and it was stretched and bowed on her side so that it practically touched the ground. We had a few plants against the fence on our side but nothing like she did, and yet she kept insisting it must be our fault. When we moved out, we hired a couple of gardeners to just tidy the garden up a bit for the next tenants. We left them to it and went inside to pack. When we checked on them later we found that the neighbor had come in and told them to get rid of all of our plants by the fence, which technically belonged to the landlord, and instead of coming to check with us, they just totally ripped out every flower bed along the fence on the say-so of some random stranger. And of course it made no damn difference to the fence whatsoever. As a gardener here, that hurt to read. I'm so sorry. I imagine one of the top rules is only follow the instructions of the person paying you. Growing up my neighbor paid a tree company to cut a tree in the corner of our yard that shared their fence. We were on a camping trip and just happened to come back and find them there. The only things that had been cut at that point was some branches hanging over to her side of the fence which she could legally remove. So the person paying isn't always the one that owns the land. I was told that the apartment across from me had kids, but only on every other weekend. So that was a refking lie. They had their kids there every day, all day, and all these kids did was scream 24/7. The parents would also scream back to them, with the TV permanently set to 90 on the volume. No kids show either. It's 1-bedroom apartments, and they had like 5 kids, including a toddler. Oh, how did I know? Their kids tried to get into my apartment twice. They eventually skipped out, and I got to see the stuff the cleaners had to haul away. There was an adult bed, a crib, and nothing else. These kids were sleeping on hardwood floors every night. When I looked into the bedroom, there was a kid-sized hole in the wall, like someone had picked up and threw a child into the wall. Now I understand why the kids cried all the time. That's so incredibly sad. Those poor kids. My boyfriend and I had a next door neighbor around our age who we thought seemed alright. Laid back professional. Rented the house with his girlfriend. Smoked a ton of weed. Nothing really noteworthy. His girlfriend eventually left him, and we watched the dude slowly lose his mind after that. After a series of episodes of his screaming arguments on the phone, or when his ex would stop by, we eventually saw it peak when he took a hammer to his cabinets. Our bedroom window had a direct view of his balcony and kitchen window. I was falling asleep when I started hearing a repetitive banging sound and looked out the window to see his perfectly lit kitchen window. In the window was our neighbor just smashing the ever-loving fuck out of his kitchen cabinets. I know the landlord just renovated, and those cabinets were brand new. He was demolishing his fucking kitchen while screaming and laughing, and we could see everything from the comfort of our own bed. He wasn't able to see us, and I remember being frozen while witnessing this man just unhinge from reality like that. I grabbed my boyfriend as a witness to the event, and the neighbor eventually calmed down and left the kitchen from our view. I don't think I slept much that night. The property manager saw us outside a few weeks later and told us that he moved. Then she told me she thinks the rental is cursed because it's broken up the last 3 couples she moved in. I don't remember this well, as this was handled by my parents ever since we arrived to the building we are currently living in. The water bill, I don't know if that's how it's called, had been insanely high. After years trying to cut showers and stuff like that, they finally called the water company. Turns out the laundromat downstairs, which was owned by another neighbor, had tweaked its pipes so that all the water they used was marked as used by us. Not any business, a laundromat. Eventually it was fixed, and we are back to paying a reasonable amount. But I don't remember if we were ever compensated for all the previous years. My dad, who was fighting that, died around the same time. Not related lol. He had cancer. After years trying to cut showers and stuff like that, they finally called the water company. Took years to call the water company? I imagine the water bill would be ridiculously high unless not too many people use the laundromat. But fuck that neighbor. At first we thought it was because we had moved to a nicer neighborhood in my city. The government subsidizes a percentage of certain bills if you live in a low-income area. Then came the cutting showers. And when we called the company, it was a row. Yeah, we'll be there in 3 to 6 months to take a look cause public services in a developing country lol. Good thing it's a mostly family/residential area, so most places have their own washing machines. But the laundromat served a few students living around. Here a water bill is about $10 to $20 a month, and we were paying well over $100. I was the admin of the community Facebook page for a nice gated community, and I really tried to be a good fair admin. I kicked a member off for calling all the women of the neighborhood useless CTS and saying that all housewives should be muzzled and chained to the stoves where they belonged. So he showed up at my house threatening to burn it down with our dogs inside. We were scared to leave our house for a while. I'd have called the cops if he threatened arson and murder. Yeah, that shit don't fly. You let people like that push you around once, they'll try and do it forever. I would have slammed the door in his face and come back out with a weapon while my fiance called the cops. The real challenge would have been keeping her from coming out with one too. You make threats, I have no choice but to assume you intend to carry them out and react accordingly. That's one of the first things my dad taught me. Don't let someone push you around and make you their own personal pet. They won't let it go until you die. We had a neighbor who was obviously nuts. They were older and both unemployed and having a rough go of it. So what's a unstable busybody to do? Why? Peek over your neighbor's 6-foot-tall solid wood fence to spy. They called animal control on us because the dog's splashy pool water was gross. Not their drinking water. That was an automatic watering system that refilled with fresh water every time they used it. But the splashy baby pool water the dogs like to play in. We asked them, why the fuck did you call animal control on us? Our dogs have their own floor of the house. They are hardly abused, they said, hysterically sobbing. We just didn't know what to do. We relocated to another residence after that. They then stole their huge ceramic pots of black bamboo that went on either side of the porch. When we pointed the theft out, they got angry and claimed since we were moving out, they were fair game. That's not how moving works. That's not how moving works at all. They live next to the Sackville Bagginses. Not so much a neighbor, but a roommate in my dorm. First semester of my sophomore year, me and a guy named Alex became friends. He was a junior and I was obviously a sophomore, and we both were living in a mostly freshman dorm. I had a super shitty roommate who would often steal and throw away my things and claim it wasn't him, or that it accidentally got thrown away, or would do other random shit vandalizing my stuff. But the hall director just claimed it was minor things and wouldn't take action. But at the semester break, Alex's roommate dropped out of school, and we asked the hall director if I could move into Alex's room. He agreed and I moved in for the start of second semester. However, things got off to a very rocky start. Alex apparently went to bed at 7:30 almost every night. He also could not sleep through a single peep. Despite there being no act, he demanded the window stay shut because the ambient noise from outside was too loud. He also complained that my computer fan was too loud, or that me typing on my keyboard was too loud, and demanded both stop after 7:30. I would often go to the dorm room next to us to hang out, to not wake him up. But he claimed our voices carried too much and would tell us to be quiet. So needless to say, things didn't go well. Suddenly at the end of April, only like 3 weeks into February, my grandmother had a stroke and eventually died. I had to fly out of town for the funeral and miss a week of school. Apparently Alex took this as a prime opportunity and he called me to tell me I was moving out. But he also waited until the funeral started to call and left a voicemail knowing both I wouldn't answer and that I couldn't call back for a few hours at the soonest. The call said that he decided to move my stuff into the hallway and I should come get it if I didn't want it stolen. My friends on the floor grabbed my stuff and put it in their rooms to keep safe, but I'm sure some things went missing. I was obviously in no way able to get home that day, nor was I really in the mood to talk to him on the phone about it. However, obviously what he did was both not allowed to the dorm rules, but also was illegal. And he ended up getting kicked out of the dorm, and I ended up having the room to myself for the rest of the year. What an asshole. Karma caught up to him fast, lol. If you are new to TattleTale TV, please subscribe. We have new videos every day. Stay tuned for more coming up next.